First of all, good afternoon, and I am sure the topic is so interesting, we'll be awake throughout the session. I want to really thank Mr. Verma for inviting me and hosting me for this excellent conference on pensions. A topic which I think is very, very important, but totally neglected. I am not sure how many of you have seen my numerous pieces in the newspapers where I say that the elderly have no voice because generally they are neglected and probably they don't have the voting strength. But if you look at the numbers, there are 11 crore today. By 2030, there'll be many more, and by 2050, there'll be double. So you can imagine what this chunk is that we are talking of, but because it's a silent chunk, they don't have a voice. Probably they are not roaming around the streets, not voters for the politicians. Therefore, they are the neglected lot. So I've been writing repeatedly, and if you see my website at IIM Bangalore, you'll see a couple of my articles that I've been writing on pension. I'll come to that research a little later. I've been emphasizing universal pension, but then I'll come at the closing end to that part of my work. To begin with, I would like to mention that as far as Professor Mukul Asher is concerned, we all have been fans of him. When he first started talking of pensions, early 90s, we were wondering, and I used to be at the Reserve Bank of India as a director fiscal, and I used to be wondering, why is he talking of it? But then he brought in the Chile experience, and I don't know if he remembers, but in 1990s, 97, I remember he came and met us and told us that we need to start thinking of it. I think we have yet not started thinking in real earnest as to what this problem is. My worry is when it strikes us, and Professor Asher did mention it, when it strikes us, it may be too late. Just look at the American system, how much they are now worried of what is going to happen to their 401 and all those pension-related things. So I think it's high time we take this issue seriously, and I'm so happy that the Pension Regulatory Authority is flagging these issues and conducting these sort of conferences, and of course inviting people across the spectrum, listening to them, and probably accommodating their views. As far as my presentation is concerned, I'm going to focus on my grassroots level experience. You have heard in the morning session the theoretical aspects. I will, and I'm sure the type of profile that I have interacted and realized that all of you have is you're into the field, so I'm not going to go into the theoretical aspects. I've been undertaking survey on financial inclusion and gold in 3-4 areas, in rural areas around Bangalore. The areas that I have covered are Kurnool, Tumkur, and Kuppam. And what I'm going to share with you is the observations that I have, which probably the forum like this where policymakers are there and practitioners are there, probably you will find them useful, and I hope you will find them useful. That's why I thought I'll flag them and bring to your notice. What I'm finding is, and this is applicable to Atal as well as general pension, people are worried, where do they keep their records? The segment that we are talking of is absolutely grassroots segment. I'm not talking of people who are in cities and investing in stock markets. I'm talking of people who are at the grassroots level where I'm conducting my surveys. This may sound very strange in a room like this, but the genuine concern is, sir, where will we keep our records? Where will we keep that paper? How will we preserve it? The second thing they asked me is, how do you calculate returns? Why is gold not a better option? And this issue was raised in the morning. The best option that they can think of is chit funds. They asked me, why chit funds is not a better saving? And I tell them it's a different instrument. And they tell me, well, what's so different? Now that's a problem of financial literacy, which people haven't understood what we are offering. They think it's something like a standard financial instrument. The far more competing topic is house, more than gold, more than chit fund. Chit fund, of course, shows the confusion, but it is house. They think that we are able to make a house only by the age of 60, and that is all that they need. They really do not know that, and probably when it hits them in the face, When it comes later, they will realize it. But house is competing extensively with the insurance. So probably we need to think quickly about using the house as an asset and building a reverse mortgage, which at least in the areas that I am working is not heard of. The third thing, I find them struggling with cash. They really are not capable because the cash flow to them is so irregular. They are not capable of handling an instrument where they have to put money regularly. And that is the limitations that they have, a genuine limitation. One thought that comes to my mind when I'm interacting with them is, and gold plays a role there, how liquid can an insurance product be? Can I encash it like gold? I have no answers. I'm just sharing with you the type of problems that they come up with me. Can the instrument be liquid like gold? In case I need it in an emergency, I can encash it. You'll be surprised to know, at least in the segments that I'm operating in, especially in Kurnool, they were asking, how about the public provident fund? Public provident fund gives me a return of a higher return than the instruments like Atal pension. You'll be surprised to some extent, even recurring deposit, they are very happy with. And recurring deposit also gives them a reasonably good return. Next issue that they face is procedure for opening is very, very cumbersome. They keep telling me, and they tell me that even servicing it and collecting it is a challenge. Even if they get the pension, their worry is how will it reach them? Maybe the intermediary, maybe simple postman example they quoted me, that when they get pension under the scheme, the postman certainly has a cut in it. Now we all know the segment that I have spoken of is really low income, and low income workers are obviously the ones which rely the more on social security. How are we really going to reach them? Now we are aware of the fact that any social security scheme is going to help reduce poverty and income inequalities. So the significance and importance of the scheme can never be undermined. It's very, very important. I also want to flag to you now a few more observations, and those are, the first one, as we are aware, life expectancy has been increasing. You look at the life expectancy in the last 30 years, obviously you see at 60 it is 12, and at 70 it is still around 9. So life expectancy has been increasing. Retirement is expensive, but somehow the general public is not able to realize it. And longer retirement is more expensive. With life expectancy increasing, that aspect has not at all been recognized by the public. Also, over this period of time, healthcare costs have increased. Nursing has become extremely expensive. I want to flag another issue for you. And in the morning session, this was discussed. Interest rates will have to fall in this country. There is no other go. The reason is very simple. It's a matter of time, but sooner or later, if investment has to grow, economic growth has to take place, interest rates have to come down. And therefore, one has to be prepared for it. How are we going to factor it in our pension plans? Now, savings is a really hard phenomena. In behavioral economics, all of us who have studied this know that savings is hard. People are myopic. They are not able to see anything beyond next 2 years. Actually, the income segment in which I am working, they are not even able to see beyond the current season that they are living in. So for them, 1 year is a long term, 2 year is infinity. So how do we bring them into this fold and tell them that this is something which will take care of them 30 years from now? House is all that they care, gold is the second best. So financial literacy is extensively lacking in this area. We need to do something about it. And I want to bring one more factor to your notice now, and that is regarding the wholesome nature of Social Security. While we talk of pensions, there is something which has a direct impact on pensions, and that is insurance. Insurance has implications for pension, and when it comes to old age, medical insurance, hospital insurance are other instruments which can help in handling this issue. Now coming to the Atal Pension Yojana, and I've just written an article which is on my website criticizing Atal Pension Yojana and making suggestions how it can be made more user-friendly. Some of the topics that have come to my notice during these surveys are the amount at time of retirement is very low, despite the fact that their contribution is also very low. But they feel that this amount 20 years from now or 30 years from now, what's going to be their net present value? And therefore, they go back to gold and go back to house. And once you tell them that this is what will happen after 20 years or 30 years, they come back and say, the moment they hear I'm from RBI and I'm the RBI chair and I go with my research assistants, their first reaction is, you tell us, you are from the bank, what value is this? So net present value, they do think, they do know, 20 years or 30 years, they tell me, firstly, of course, they tell me, where will I keep these papers? How will I know this continue? The second thing they tell me is the returns, and they think gold is the best, house is just the best. One thing which I'm realizing now in the field is, yes, for some segment of the society, Atal Pension Yojana has worked, but there is a significant segment of the society which is elderly already, and we don't have a product for them. And therefore, when you're talking to people, that gap emerges very quickly. Now, one segment of the society cannot be touched by Atal Pension Yojana. Theoretically, yes, but when I'm in the field, I'm beginning to realize that that's not happening. That is the elderly women. And Professor Usher mentioned in the morning feminization of the elderly. These women in remote areas, even when they were young, were hardly allowed to go out of the house, at least not to the banks, or the bankers were at least not allowed to come and meet them. But when they're elderly and when they're widowed, because when you talk of feminization of the elderly, the point that he is making is that longevity of female segment of the society is generally higher than the male segment. That feminization is having a toll, and therefore Atal Pension Yojana is not touching the female segment, which I think deserve much more. Many of the women do not have a bank account. Even under the Jan Dhan Yojana, the people who have had bank accounts, it's not the women who have been covered extensively, and you get that feel when you are working in those remote areas doing your surveys. In the segment that I operate, savings, and certainly savings with a 30-year horizon, is a luxury. For us in this room, rupees 291 monthly contribution is less than the cost of lunch we take. For them, it's a huge amount. And therefore, because it is so significant, the reluctance is clearly visible there. And of course, I've mentioned right in the beginning, if there has to be a financial instrument and they're ready to accept a financial instrument, they find PPF and to some extent recurring deposit better. Given this general observation, and then my criticism of the Atal Pension Yojana, both these things that I've shared with you are there in my working papers. Let me use this opportunity with policymakers and senior officials of the pension authority sitting here to pitch for something which has been dear to my heart. And that is the need to go for universal pension. I think it's easy to administer. And obviously you will bounce back on me and say, Professor, what about the fiscal cost? At rupees 500 per month, if the economy grows at around 5% per year, the cost is less than 1% of GDP. Let me remind you, Food Security Act, which is 2,40,000 odd crore, is nearly 2% of GDP. Also, interest payments on the debt which has already been incurred is nearly 3.6% of GDP. Universal pension, 500 rupees a month, if the economy grows at 5% per year, is 1% of GDP. My suggestion is, and we are working along with another student now, coming out with another paper, and it will be in publication in about 2 months' time. I'm suggesting, given my experience in the field and given feminization of the elderly, let's start with a simple scheme of universal pension for elderly women, just elderly women. And that will not cost more than 0.6% of GDP, which I think we can afford. And why I say that is, given the profile, given the experience of the women in financial inclusion, the core area on which I do research, women have emerged as far more responsible in their behavior. If this pension, universal pension, reaches them, the chances of it getting gambled away or wasted on liquor is minimized. That money will flow into the family and will fulfill the objective of reducing poverty, reducing income inequalities. Global estimates also of universal pension are not very high. They range between 1.8% to about 2%. So therefore, it's not something that should be just thrown out of the window because it has a fiscal cost. Also, I would like to remind this august audience, the expenditure multiplier, which we are calculating in our paper, the expenditure multiplier of pension for the elderly is 2.3%. So it is going to lead to growth in the economy. It's sort of a cyclical growth that it will lead to. Now, 2 more points which I want to mention, and Professor Usher is here and people from Ministry of Finance are here. And maybe some of you will not like this idea. I would like to say, is it possible to start thinking of increasing the age at which pension will begin? Should it begin at 60? Should it begin at 65? Should it begin at 70? And this comes from my study of American economy, where full benefits accrue at 70. And why I say that is because of longevity of life that is taking place. I want to conclude with one thought for all of you. In a country like ours, which has the largest number of elderly in the world, we don't have a single dedicated research center on elderly. And I feel that all the more every time I come to a forum like this, I feel that gap. A dedicated center on elderly, which brings in the psychology